Good evening. This is Bruce Montgomery, and thank you for joining me on another edition of Technology Access Television. Well, I bet you didn't know you were in the center of the broadband universe. Yes, right here in Chicago is the gateway to all things broadband, whether it's fiber, whether it's 4G, whether it's wireless, whatever it is, it's going on right here in Chicago. And this has become a hot topic because now everyone is recognizing that a natural asset of the city of Chicago, yes, you know us for transportation, you know us for rail, you know us for airports, you know us for highways. Well, you better get to know Illinois and Chicago for fiber too, because all roads lead to Chicago. You know, there are more fiber connections in Chicago in data centers crossing and crisscrossing the country that pass right through here. And now we've got the big idea that why don't we capitalize on all of this technology assets and turn it into a strategic advantage. And that's what's going on in Chicago. That's what's going on in Illinois. And fortunately, we have some leadership that's actually catching a clue and figuring out that this is something that needs to be invested in and leveraged to expand job and economic opportunity for every single resident of this great state and also the country as well. And today we're going to be delving into what's going on in regards to the state of Illinois with broadband. You know, the state has been very fortunate, received quite a bit of money. In fact, the state of Illinois received and put together almost $350 million that's gone to developing broadband assets in the state, second only to California in its success with the broadband stimulus dollars. And well, look, don't get me acting like I know what I'm talking about. I got somebody here that actually knows what's going on. He's the director of Broadband Illinois, Partnership for Connected Illinois, that oversees broadband efforts here in the state of Illinois. My guest today is Drew Clark, and he's going to tell us all about what's going on in this great state of Illinois in regards to broadband technology. Drew, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Bruce. It's a pleasure to finally be here.
Well, I'm happy you could make your way up here from Springfield to Chicago, and I think every time you come, you find there's a lot going on in this city.
This is a happening place. It's just like you said in your intro, Bruce. Chicago is the center of the broadband universe, and people are finally realizing that.
Well, you know, we have a tremendous legacy, which I like to talk about all the time. And, you know, but this is somewhat of a young industry, even though, yeah, the bell system's been around for all these many years. You know, but I hear people laugh and say that, well, if Thomas Edison came back and he saw the electrical infrastructure, he would kind of say, gee, this looks like the way I left it. But if Alexander Graham Bell came back and said, what's all of this stuff? What's
right.
These iPads and iPhones and 4G and all this kind of stuff? So telecom is really an exciting area, and Chicago's kind of been at the center of that for a long time. But tell us, what actually is the Partnership for Connected Illinois?
Well, sure. So Partnership for Connected Illinois, or Broadband Illinois, is a statewide nonprofit organization. We're based in Springfield, which is appropriate because we serve everyone in the state, and Springfield is a very centrally located location. So just a short 3-hour drive up to Chicago. Broadband Illinois is involved in better broadband, better lives. We want to make sure everyone in the state has access to and knowledge to make use of the highest capacity networks possible.
So now we hear a lot of talk about fiber optic and gigabit communities, and I know, what role does Broadband Illinois play in putting this fiber to good use in the state of Illinois?
Well, we're a convener. In fact, we think of ourselves as convening, connecting, and collaborating with all players. We have E-teams throughout the state, E-teams for a community team that is focused on the internet infrastructure. And the key part and role that the E-teams play is to bring broadband providers with economic development officials, to get them talking, to get them to see the opportunities that they may not have seen from their own vantage point. So it's about the public-private partnership and bringing parties together.
Now, Broadband Illinois, a Partnership for Connected Illinois, was created simultaneous with the dispensation of these federal dollars that went to stimulate broadband deployment and adoption in the state?
Exactly. So the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of February 2009 put forth funding to state entities, state broadband initiative entities. They could be either state entities or nonprofit entities that had partnerships, alliances with the state. Here in Illinois, the Partnership for Connected Illinois was selected as the designated entity, and we've received the federal and state matching funds together with additional funding from private and foundations. And the goal of this effort is to engage in broadband planning and mapping for starters, but then that becomes a repository, a tool. On broadbandillinois.org you can find reams of information about the availability of broadband, about the speeds that broadband is available. Soon we'll be publishing research on the demand or the take rates for broadband. This information becomes a tool to get better broadband and better lives, to get better deployment, to work with providers on enhancing investment, to make sure broadband expands just beyond where it stops off, and then to do the training, or to begin the training process with partners throughout the state that can take it to the next level.
Now, Illinois is a pretty interesting state because you have this big city up north called Chicago, and then you have a very expansive state that's quite different from the east to the west and the north to the south. I mean, you've got windmills, you've got coal mines, you've got soybeans and hogs, you've got the Mississippi River, you've got John Deere, you've got Caterpillar. So you've got quite a diversity of activity going all around. But for many years, the importance of connectivity was not well appreciated through every corner in the state. What's different now?
Well, two things. First off, you're quite right that our state is an extremely diverse one, and getting the interests together hasn't always been easy. There's been a bunch of regional initiatives, 5, 6, 7 years ago that were focused on their region, making sure their region had connectivity, was connected, was working with the economic development stakeholders. What's happened over the last 3, 4 years with Broadband Illinois playing a role in shepherding these activities is that we now have a statewide consciousness about broadband. Now, the Recovery Act helped because through the leadership of the governor's office and others, we were able to collaboratively work together to facilitate the maximum possible investment within the state of Illinois. And we've continued that in terms of working with the providers throughout the state of whatever type, landline, wireline, wireless, fiber, cable, all technologies are part of the picture. So I guess what's changed is we move from a regional to a statewide approach to broadband. Now, the second thing I wanted to mention really just kind of happened or occurred yesterday, where Mayor Rahm Emanuel spoke about broadband and the city of Chicago. And he made the point, as others have made before, that Chicago can be a place that entrepreneurs, that tech companies don't need to just get educated here in Illinois and leave, but can stay here rather than going to the east or west coast and make Chicago and the state of Illinois the center place of broadband in the nation.
Well, much of the historic telecommunications infrastructure, in fact, at one time, all of the telecommunications infrastructure was actually manufactured, produced, and distributed out of here because during the days of the old Bell system, Western Electric was where all that created. When divestiture came about, and the spinoff companies started to take hold, and companies like Tel Labs and Motorola and Annixter and Andrew Corporation and many, many others spun off and started to take some of that core competency that Chicago had and build other technologies and providers that sold equipment both in the public and the private networks. And so this has been a core competency of the Chicago and Illinois area, not to mention the phenomenal leadership at places like the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana. In fact, when this whole broadband thing started, there were a couple of institutions that had been talking about this with great concern for their regions. I think of Southern Illinois University and the group that was down in the southern part of the state, really looking at the needs down there, because when you look at these great institutions like SIU, they were living off of very modest type of connectivity.
Oh, absolutely.
And they lobbied for years to get the kind of connectivity they needed to support these great learning institutions that they have. And the same thing was going on up in DeKalb in northern Illinois.
That's right.
So I think when the broadband stimulus kind of showed up, these guys were already ready because they had been out there meeting and lobbying and cajoling and coordinating and, like you say, collaborating and creating these kinds of pools. So Chicago was Illinois was right there at the right time with a lot of skill sets that allowed it to be successful going after these stimulus dollars.
Yeah, there's not a major university in the state that hasn't had some interest or focus on broadband. You mentioned Northern Illinois University and Southern Illinois University, but Western Illinois University has been very active as well through their Illinois Institute of Rural Affairs, and Eastern Illinois University has also gotten involved, as well, of course, as University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, which
Yes.
is where Mark Andreessen was when he invented Mosaic, the first
that's
web
exactly
browser.
right. And now let's talk about Champaign, because, you know, with all this talk about gigabit and putting fiber, and of course everybody's all excited about what Google's doing in Kansas City.
Sure.
Well, what are they doing down in Champaign? Aren't they doing the same thing in Champaign, Urbana?
Well, it's quite right, Bruce, that UC2B, which is about bringing big broadband to Urbana-Champaign, was one of the projects funded under the Recovery Act. And they're actually bringing a fiber to the home development to certain segments of Urbana-Champaign. And they are, you know, digging up the ground and putting the fiber in and making service live.
So a few months from now or a year from now, anchor institutions like schools and churches and libraries and community centers and residents' actual homes will have a direct high-speed fiber optic connection. What kind of speeds are we talking about will be available to residents in the Champaign-Urbana area?
Well, I'm not sure of the specifics of what UC2B is offering in terms of customer offerings, but the fiber connectivity that they're offering, as well as fiber that other companies like Verizon are offering through its Fios, is a gigabit level. I mean,
Oh, really?
So the connectivity can be that high. Now again, whether a particular company or provider offers that high is sort of a market choice that they make based on the market conditions. But the connectivity is there.
Now, when you talk about broadband and you talk about speeds and you talk about gigabit, that's all fine and good. But where the rubber meets the road is when you talk about how are people using this. How are they using it to advance educational opportunities or distance learning or telemedicine or applications that people can understand? Hey, you know, like in rural telemedicine and telehealth, people say this could be the difference between life or death. If I'm able to get a specialist 50 miles away or 100 miles away to interact in an emergency situation and get that second opinion from talent from all over the state to weigh in, that means that the high quality medical decisions will be made that maybe couldn't have been made previously. Are we seeing an elevation of people becoming smarter about what this kind of broadband can mean in terms of how it's applied in vertical applications?
Absolutely, and you're quite right to focus on the better lives part of what broadband can bring. It's not just higher speeds and better broadband, it's getting to improved lives. And I think that what you cited with in terms of telemedicine is a perfect example. Just like with education or public safety or benefits to agriculture, telemedicine is an area that broadband can really change the dynamics of the provision of health care. And one of the things that we at Broadband Illinois have been fortunate to engage in is something we call the Broadband Innovation Fund. And earlier this week we actually made award announcements of 14 entities within the state of Illinois that are doing innovative applications that help to promote broadband and the use of high-speed broadband networks. And one of those that was funded is the Metropolitan Chicago Healthcare Group, which has got a pilot program to bring telemedicine between Chicago and hospitals in 2 or 3 rural areas of the state. So this is happening right in front of us right now, the kinds of applications that will bring these better lives to people throughout Illinois.
Now, the bottom line for stimulus dollars was to create an economic climate of uplift, so that there would be job opportunities, that there would be investments being made. The so-called shovel-ready aspect was saying that this money was going to go in to make projects that would actually cause construction to happen and people to be employed. And so when people are driving across the state or across the city and they see these big orange reels of fiber optic cable and they see people laying, is that really happening? How many jobs are being created in the state? What type of impetus are we seeing of some stimulation from this broadband that's actually creating employment opportunities for residents of the state of Illinois?
Absolutely. It's a wonderful sight to see those orange pylons with fiber. At Broadband Illinois, we have a role of kind of facilitating and overseeing and looking at. We're not the ones who are putting the cables in the ground or the towers high up in the air. What we are doing, though, is we're tracking their progress. And at our broadbandillinois.org website, we actually have monthly reports on the number of jobs produced, the number of fiber miles laid, the number of community anchor institutions connected, the number of investment, and all manner of measurements. So you can track on a month-to-month basis how many thousands of jobs have been created in the state because of these investments.
Now, I like to say that, and I like to maybe get a fact check here, but I said Chicago or Illinois was phenomenally successful, that we created a pool of assets in excess of $300 million. Is that true?
In the state of Illinois, from the Recovery Act, there were $350 million of aggregate investment from federal and state dollars. Now, there's obviously more investment than that by the private sector, and the private sector is investing, billions of dollars in broadband.
So that means the Comcast, the AT&T, the Verizons, the U.S. Cellulars, they're investing in infrastructure that's at a scale that maybe we've never seen before, because as people are adopting these mobile devices, and now wireless broadband is really perceived as the value it is. We just had WiMAX be introduced in Illinois, and almost 2 years after its introduction, now we're off to the next thing of LTE, and people are talking about 1 meg and 2 meg and 3 meg, 4 meg, 5 meg speeds on mobile devices in many, many parts of the state.
One of the great things about broadband is there really are lots of different flavors of it. So like your comment earlier about, Alexander Graham Bell would be very surprised coming back, because it really has changed. And even in the broadband world in the last 10 years, we used to think of broadband, okay, you have broadband, check, things are mission accomplished. It's not like that, because broadband used to be 200 megabits per second. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, said, okay, now it's going to be 768 megabits per second. That's not really quite adequate to do the kinds of things you need to watch Netflix, to do video conferencing. I think a 1.5 or a 3 meg is a more likely threshold. So you've got this variety of flavors of broadband, and then you have a variety of technologies that service it. Now, I used to live just about 26 miles north of Springfield in a rural town called Petersburg. I had no cable access. I had no DSL or digital subscriber line service. The only type of broadband I had was from a Sprint mobile device. Now, the broadband speeds were about 1 megabit at the most. And so that was not adequate to do a lot of the kinds of things that I wanted to do with broadband. I moved into Springfield about 5 months ago. I now have access to a cable modem, DOCSIS 3.0 service, and I have 25 meg broadband, and I can do Netflix very easily now.
Then
it has made a big difference in the life of my family. And so there are technologies that each serve particular purposes, right? Wireless is great. The speeds are lower. Now, you point out LTE has come to Illinois. Verizon and AT&T have both deployed LTE networks.
And Sprint too, starting to.
And Sprint too. And it's fabulous, because you can get speeds of 10 megabits per second
on
from an LTE wireless device. Now, it doesn't quite go out as far as Petersburg yet, but I'm sure it will get there. I'm sure that the progress is getting there.
Now, let's talk about this. You said that you have personal life experiences, you and your family and your young kids and your wife. You guys lived out in a rural area, and at that point you had to depend on your mobile phone for the kind of connectivity you have, or mobile, maybe had a mobile wireless modem or something that you use. But then when you moved in town, you saw what was really possible, and you got a cable provider. You have that. But let's bring it up here to the city of Chicago. Let's talk about what's going on in the city. There's a lot of broadband that's out there, but it's going by some people's houses, and they're like, so what? So it's out there. I don't see what the big deal is. Or I can't afford it. Maybe a big arbiter of why people are adopting or not adopting is saying, hey, I've got to put food on the table, or I'm, going to night school, or I'm trying to, I'm working part-time. I can't afford some of the fees that people are charging for this kind of thing. So the whole adoption question.
Absolutely.
How is Broadband Illinois engaged in helping bring people who may want to adopt and may need to understand what the benefits of adoption are, to take advantage of the cable that's in the ground right next to their house, but they're not using for the purposes you talk about?
Right. The vast majority of Illinoisans have access to broadband, but only 69% of Illinoisans subscribe to broadband service in the home. Now that compares to about 93, 95% of the population that has a telephone, a landline or a cellular telephone. So that 24-point difference is what we think of as the digital divide that needs to be bridged. There are people who could benefit from broadband who are not currently subscribing to broadband service. And many of them are here in Chicago, just as they are throughout the state. And so one of the key aspects that we're now engaged in at Broadband Illinois is to make sure that people are aware of the benefits of broadband, know who their providers are, and have access to materials that can make the case for them subscribing. When the Federal Communications Commission put out its national broadband plan, it identified 3 key barriers to adoption of broadband. One of them is cost. Another of them is relevance. Why does this matter to me? And the third is digital literacy. They just lack the skills and tools to get online. Okay, that could be a senior who never has thought they needed to and hasn't taken the time or effort to do so, or it could be a low-income person who felt like they can't afford a computer. So there are lots of very creative efforts right now to tackle that challenge. One of them is by Comcast, its Internet Essentials program. Another is by a consortium called Connect to Compete that's on a similar mode. The Federal Communications Commission has put out something called the Broadband Lifeline Pilot Program. And we at Broadband Illinois have, on behalf of 7 telecommunications carriers in rural parts of the state, put forth an application. And at the heart of all these proposals is subsidize the internet cost for low-income individuals, provide a low-cost computer that people can use to get online because they may not have a good quality computer, and engage in training so that people can learn the basics.
You know, one of the issues, you made a comment earlier about Mark Andreessen, and I happen to, be around in my work in the computer industry when that whole evolution of that activity was happening. He was a student at this place called the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, NCSA, at the U of I, and there was great work going on at Champaign-Urbana up here in Chicago with all of their smarts in the graphics area. But the key, of course, is that when Mark, was recruited to come out and establish Netscape, Netscape ended up being established in, San Jose or Santa Clara somewhere. And so one of the big things is when people think about the current technology, and they think about Apple Computer, and they think about Microsoft, they think about Google, and they think of all of these companies somewhere else, the economic impact for these technologies need to be right here in the state of Illinois.
That's right.
I mean, we have enough brain power. In fact, I heard the other day that the city of Chicago has the largest distribution of iPads in public education of any school district in the country. So that means more iPads will be in kids' book packs in Chicago, but we have to turn that into entrepreneurial endeavors.
And it's beginning to happen.
And so let's talk about that innovation angle. What is Broadband's Illinois' connection to entrepreneurship, to new companies, to places like 1871, to places like the Tech Park down in Champaign-Urbana? How is Broadband Illinois talking about what comes next in broadband and making Illinois test bed number 1 for these innovations, and so that these companies can end up creating hundreds or even thousands of jobs right here in Illinois based on how people are using broadband in new ways?
Well, great question, Bruce, and I tackle it in three ways. The first is Chicago has become a hub for, as you know better than I, there are many technology companies here, and it's exciting to see the critical mass happening with 1871, with the Illinois Technology Association and other groups. And in particular, Chicago is almost at the vanguard of the open data movement. The notion to get public data out into the open, some of the things that is going on at the city of Chicago. Rahm Emanuel is very interested in it. And of course, what we at Broadband Illinois have always been about is getting data out into the open through public data about broadband. So it's the open data angle and a lot of development going on in Chicago, software development going on in that front. Secondly, I mentioned earlier the Broadband Innovation Fund that we recently launched and announced earlier this week. We picked 14 awardees out of 113 applicants throughout the state. 4 or 5 of them are here in Chicago, and we're really looking forward to seeing how those projects take shape, and not just those that are selected, but all of the applicants. We want to engage with them and see how we can connect them to others who want to make use of broadband.
So you're talking about having some continuing dialogue with potential broadband innovators.
Exactly.
And people coming to the table saying, I've got an idea, and I'd like to do this in my community, or I'd like to do this in this vertical market, or I'd like to bring a solution to the table for seniors or for certain targeted audiences.
That's exactly right.
And we want to stimulate that kind of conversation.
And it's through our E-teams, and this is the third point, Bruce, is through our 10 E-teams throughout the state, and we've got an E-team organized here in Chicago. And what we want to do with these E-teams is to bring all these players together, bring those who are involved in computer training centers and computer technology centers, and who are involved in the libraries and making sure that access is available through those, the entrepreneurs, the individuals who are trying to do incubation of businesses. I mean, this city is ripe for a broadband moment, and to make sure that we build on this initiative and this energy to take it to the next level so that entrepreneurs and businesses can truly regard this as the place for tech innovation.
Well, you and I happened to luck into attending a meeting where the mayor was hosted by AT&T and talking about how he's excited and wants to push the envelope on this, and he needs the private sector, especially the big carriers, the big telcos, the big providers, to really be the bedrock behind this, because these are the guys with the big checkbooks. These are the guys that are investing millions daily, in fact, maybe to create the kind of infrastructure. But don't those folks also need to be at the table to really be aware of where innovation is coming from in so many different sectors? Because, you know, AT&T may be a beneficiary, as an example, of iPhone and 4G and LTE, but they didn't invent it. You know, they need this innovation to continue locally to drive adoption of these very investments they're making. Otherwise, the investments are for naught.
And they are at the table. They are clearly involved in the mayor's Chicago Broadband Initiative. And you know, we look forward to continuing the work that we've done with providers throughout the state, you know, here in the Chicago area. And this is a very wired city, and we want to be able to build on that and leverage that.
Do you think that there is a lot to be learned? And you know, the governor just took a trip to Brazil.
Correct.
And he took a contingent down there, and they actually visited many different areas. But you know, I think some Chicagoans could benefit from going down to Champaign-Urbana, or going down to Carbondale, or going to Effingham, or going to you know, and seeing the great innovation that's going on in some of these areas, as well as some of those folks could come up to Chicago and see what's going on in our medical districts, in our university centers, a place like 1871, and see one of the great small business tech hubs in the entire country. Might be something could stimulate some ideas about something they want to do in Peoria, or something they want to do in DeKalb.
Well, and let's not forget Governor Quinn's Gigabit Communities Challenge, which he issued in his State of the State address this year. Applications came in on June 30th, and there were 40 cities out there that have put forward requests to build gigabit level connectivity in their communities, and we're really eagerly anticipating the announcements of those cities, because I think that will spur a new round of interest in innovation and high-speed connectivity.
Well, I know I'm going to be waiting to find out who those winners are of the governor's Gigabit Community Challenge. And so talk a little bit about how people who want to plug into this conversation can plug in. You know, they're sitting here saying, okay, you two wonky type guys are all excited about this, but I just want to figure out how to make this happen in my neighborhood, or make this happen in my community, or my business wants to leverage some of this technology. How do they plug into this information through Broadband Illinois?
Well, the first step is to go to Broadband Illinois. We've got a form for you to sign up to see, you know, do you have broadband service, to be able to you know, see what your options are. If you don't have broadband service available to you, to put forth your contact information. We provide that to broadband providers. You also have an opportunity to sign up to be on our mailing list. We put out a bi-weekly newsletter where we update people with what's going on in broadband developments here in the state.
So that's broadbandillinois.org.
Broadbandillinois.org. You've got it. Yeah.
All right.
And we're very involved right now in the efforts that the mayor is putting forward with the Broadband Challenge. We want to be able to facilitate. That's what we do best. We convene, we connect, and we stimulate collaboration. So we want to get all of the people who want to be involved in broadband to come to our website, to sign up for our newsletter, to stay involved, to work with our E-teams throughout the state, and to be a part of what's going on here in Illinois.
And for the time that you've been executive director for this organization, you moved your family here to Chicago. You've been involved with this, to Illinois, from the ground floor of this kind of thing. Are you as enthusiastic today as you were when you first started this about the progress you see in this state and the success that this state is making?
Oh, absolutely. You know, one of the things that attracted me to come here was the vision that Governor Quinn articulated when he said that, you know, we need and we can have Johnny Appleseeds of broadband throughout the state of Illinois. There are lots and lots of people throughout the state who want to have better broadband and better lives. And you know, this is just an exciting time to be involved in a broadband initiative like we are here.
As we wrap up this conversation,